I just want to say we're so passionate about classic movies. We're going to expand the conversation.
You can see the passion that's in this room.
It's thrilling to the core.
Put a new spin on some vintage films.
It's classic movies and more.
Hi, I'm Rob from Classic Movies and More, and I'm with Aurora, and we're on an actual road trip. Today we're going to interview Lloyd Ultan, Bronx Borough Historian, who's going to take us on a variety of movie-related sites and movie-related places. You excited, Aurora?
I'm very excited.
All right, as long as you don't get too excited so we get into an accident, other than that, we're really good. All right, so here he is.
Where Edison Studios stood in the Bronx. Okay, so this looks like a new building. This would not have been the building that was here when Edison was here.
Yeah, that is correct. This building was built on the site, and it was named Edison Arms after the fact that the Edison Studios occupied the site. Now, the Thomas Edison had the studio built here. It opened up in 1909, and all that was done at the Edison Studios, and because Edison said that this is the only way you could do films, is to do two-reelers. He never went beyond the two-reel film. As a result, we really don't have a complete catalog, at least none that I have been find, of all of these films that were done here. However, there was one significant film. One of the reasons why the Edison Studios was placed here was because it was 1 block away from a station on the 3rd Avenue L. And as a result, actors could come up from Broadway on the 3rd Avenue L to act in the films, especially those that didn't get much work on Broadway. One of these was a guy who came from the South and couldn't get work on Broadway. His name was D.W. Griffith. And
I think I've heard that name before.
Yes. So he came up here and he got a job and he starred in a two-reeler called From the Eagle's Nest. And it was a real potboiler. It was a story about a father who was taking his baby out in the baby buggy, and an eagle swoops down and grabs the kid and flies away to his eyrie, which is really the New Jersey Palisades.
Right.
And and as a result, he follows him desperately and climbs the rocks and gets to the nest and wrestles with the eagle and saves the baby. The eagle, of course, was a stuffed eagle, and the wings were animated by strings, which you could actually see in the film. But that was D.W. Griffith's baptism in the movies.
In the movies.
Right. And from there, he almost immediately went on to directing.
Right.
And he became a great director and got a job with the Biograph Studios, which also eventually came to the Bronx because of D.W. Griffith. But that's another story.
Yeah.
But the point is that one of the reasons why the Edison Studios came here was also because it was right across the street from the New York Botanical Garden. This was a perfect area for urban shoots or rural shots at the time, or suburban shoots. So he could get a variety of exterior shots here. The interior scenes were in a space that had a huge glass wall so that you could get a maximum amount of light. And inside, because it was silent films, you didn't have to worry about sound. You had different compartments for different sets where the actors could emote and do their job.
So they had an emoting room.
But what happened was, of course, that after feature films got to be more than two reels, the Edison Studios declined. Eventually, the studios were taken over by independent filmmakers, and one of the guys who actually worked here was Billy Bitzer, who was D.W. Griffith's cameraman And I had an uncle who worked in the Edison Studios when he was a heck of a lot younger. His job was to take these silent films and to tint them so that they would be some sort of expression of color. And this all had to be done by hand in those days. So, for instance, in the night scene, they would have a blue shade on the film, or if it was in the blazing hot desert, they would have a yellow shade on the film.
Right.
So, but that was his job, and he met Billy Bitzer there. Yeah. Now, later on, in the early days of television, it went into television production, and one of the series, a very early television series that was done here, was Man Against Crime, which was starred Ralph Bellamy. We're standing in front of a sanitation department facility that was originally the site of the Biograph Studios. I mentioned that D.W. Griffith got his start in the movies in 1909, and very quickly he moved to being a director. He got a job as a director of the Biograph Studios, which was originally located on 14th Street in Manhattan. But the Biograph Studios really blossomed under his direction because of his superior ability, all the techniques that he created that brought to the art of filmmaking. As a result, the Biograph Studios decided to build a studio basically for him. And they got this spot in the Bronx, and they built the Biograph Studios here. And it opened up in 1912. Unfortunately, by that time, D.W. Griffith got into an argument with the Biograph Studio leaders, and he fulfilled his contract with him, and he only made one movie in this studio, and only the interiors were shot here, and that was a biblical epic called Judith of Bethulia. The exteriors were done in Hollywood. Then he left them, and the Biograph Studios gradually declined at that point. And it was eventually used by various independent movie makers. My mother used to live in this neighborhood growing up, and she always told me that she remembered seeing on the back lot of the Biograph Studios a Spanish-themed film with everybody dressed in Spanish costumes, starring Bessie Love and Milton Sills, who were major movie stars in those days. So it was still a thriving studio. In the early days of sound films, there were still independents over here, and one of the things that happened here involved the star Henry Hull.
Okay.
Henry Hull had been in some silent movies, but he also made a big splash on Broadway. But he had difficulty getting job with sound films because of the quality of his voice, which was sort of plummy. But one of the independent filmmakers hired him for a major part in the motion picture that was made here, and that got to him very great notices, and as a result he was able to get a Hollywood contract and eventually filmed The Werewolf of London on Hollywood. But so Henry Hull's film career actually was stimulated by these studios. In 1940, the studio actually changed its name to the Gold Medal Studios.
Why?
I don't know why. I guess because Biograph was an old-fashioned name. But nevertheless, people in the area, and I think people in the business, still called it the Biograph Studios, even though it was officially Gold Medal. It was also used in the early days of television, and probably the best known of the television series that was made here was Car 54, Where Are You?
Oh, really?
Which was actually set in the Bronx, about two cops in a patrol car.
Fred Gwynn was one of them.
Fred Gwynn and Tootie and Muldoon were their names in the thing. It was a comedy. Now, the interesting thing about that is that if you see the television show, in the beginning where they have all the credits and the title, the words appear with a building in the background that is supposed to be the precinct house. Well, it wasn't the precinct house. It was actually the Biograph Studio building.
Oh, really?
Yes. So, so it's sort of immortalized there.
So it filmed right on this location?
Right on
here?
this location, yeah. Perfect. And there are scenes, for instance, where they are parked at the entrance to a highway. Well, that's the Cross Bronx Expressway,
yeah,
which is right next to this building. The very last film that was made here, that had its headquarters here, was Love Story.
Okay.
And after that, it closed down, and it was
what year about?
Well, when Love Story came out,
70, 71?
In the 70s, around there. And then it remained, empty until eventually the city built its sanitation department facility on this site. But these two areas, the Edison Studios and the Biograph Studios, are really part of the history of the growth and development of the motion picture industry.